Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck and I get to meet the most fascinating people in our community in the state of Jefferson. This show starts in the Medford area with the Gates family. Welcome to our show.
Thanks,
How's your connection with Medford?
Well, my husband's grandfather was C.E. Pop Gates, they called him, and he was mayor of Medford.
Now, about when, do you know?
I'm thinking it's the early 20s.
Probably.
Oh, you're taking us
20s.
way back when Medford got the train going through town and they bypassed Jacksonville and all of a sudden history really turned.
Oh, it did.
What do you know about Pop Gates?
Oh, I just know that he had a Ford agency along with being mayor, and we don't talk about this very much, but he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, which is kind of bad.
Kind of a scary
I was
thought,
wondering, do we know any of those people that
Oh,
had...
They tell me that in those days there were many members of the Ku Klux Klan in Grants Pass and Medford.
And the grand whatever was up in Glendale for the whole area.
I didn't know that.
I often wondered if we had the names written down, if people would be proud to know it or if they'd be... Thank you for sharing that. I know that my friend Bill said he'd taken the granddaughter to the parade, and she says, "That's my mom, I'd know those shoes any place." So
I think it was part of the history that maybe we were going to try to forget, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I was talking to my uncle a couple of weeks ago. He came over for lunch and we were talking about the old times a little bit, and he remembered I'd never met great-granddad. I met my grandfather, but not Pop Gates. He had passed away, I'm sure, before I was born, I would think. Mm-hmm. But my Uncle Phil had said he was a very astute man, very politically savvy, but he wasn't a very good businessman. And it ended up that the Ford dealership ended up going out of business. We went from there into the furniture business eventually. So my great-granddad was in the Ford automobile business, and then my granddad, who was George Gates Sr., ended up running the furniture store and starting the furniture store, and I believe that was in the early 40s.
It was, just before World War II.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And furniture must have been hard to come by during the war.
It was very hard. My mother-in-law was in college with a lady by the name of B. McMahon, who had McMahon furniture stores.
Ah.
And at that time, Jim McMahon had about 100 stores, so we had a lot of connections. And it was through McMahon's that they were able to get any merchandise at all.
Oh, there's so many war stories, and I'm starting to ask lots of questions like, where did these buildings from Camp White go? So if anybody is watching and knows where a Camp White building ended up, either a church or apartments, they tell me that the VFW hall came from Camp White.
Oh, really?
But now we haven't met the other son of yours. Why don't you introduce
Gary.
Gary.
Most commonly known as the other son.
Is
He's the good son, and I'm the
good one.
other
Black
son,
sheep?
actually. Yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry.
was the bad boy, he was the good boy.
He was with the Road Community College for 30 years. He's retired at age 55.
fantastic. Now, Gary, you can tell us a lot about the college, right?
Yeah, I was there the year after it began.
And before it began, it was
Job Corps camp.
a Job Corps camp, and they brought people from all over to work in the Job Corps.
Yeah, I was at college most of the time that was here in the valley, but I heard plenty of stories about
Including about some box fighting,
yeah.
and he went on to be...
George Foreman.
Yeah, George Foreman.
Isn't it incredible that right here in Grants Pass, you'd have a fighter who got his roots.
Started his fighting career in, in the locals.
Oh, but now we jump to Grants Pass, and what is the story of Gates family, Gates Furniture, right here.
Well, let's see. George started the store in 1946, and he had been with his folks in Medford for after he got out of the service, and he had been offered jobs as a photographer with some of the, like Newsweek and some of the better magazines, but he knew that it wouldn't be a good family life, so he decided to follow his dad's footsteps and opened the store in Grants Pass.
So they were
1946.
sister
46.
stores,
Yes.
Medford and Grants Pass.
Yes.
But his story is so fascinating, and you said photographer, so let's just show the folks some of the phenomenal covers of the magazine, this one,
U.S.
U.S.
camera.
camera.
Yeah.
and other shows, other shots that he had taken. What was this connection? He's a
Well,
military
He
photographer?
was a combat photographer, yeah, in the Navy, and I think he was sent around to quite a few different events to memorialize the event type of thing. So when Pappy Boyington was rescued from the prisoner of war camp, he was there to document it. When Halsey signed treaties, he was there to document, and so he must have been, again, we didn't talk much about it, really, his war career when I was growing up, but we realized that his photos were amazing. We have about 10 volumes of his from World War II in the South Pacific, is where all of his photos are from. So we quite often loan them to the high schools or the community college or people who are fascinated with that time in history. And it's great.
Absolutely
It's a
incredible.
great photo document.
Can you tell me of this one?
I believe that's when they found one of the prisoner of war camps, and at the end of the war, they were liberating the men in the prisoner of war camp. So
Just fantastic.
that
Now
shot
this,
right there is kind of
Oh.
famous.
this is it.
Yeah, that's his shot that ended up on the cover of U.S. Camera, and then one other ended up on the front of Newsweek.
Well, let's check that out too. The big brass.
Yep, he was usually there to, again, document with photography signings and meetings, and so like I say, it's kind of fascinating to look at some of the history from your father's perspective when he was taking the pictures.
Right, and that's why I have so many caveman pictures. Father was snap glasses, which was, the press for the Grants Pass caveman. What do you remember of Dad? Or you were just not born?
Oh, no. Of the growing up,
Gary was 2 and a half.
I was 2.5.
2.5 or 3 when Dad got polio. I was 6 months old when.
So you're the elder brother who has all the Do you have any memories of your dad walking?
No.
Yeah.
But you have, when he came back from war, he did the furniture store, is that right? He was CEO or owner or operator or whatever you
He
call
was
it.
He was
Those
everything.
days.
salesman, deliveryman, write it up. He would sell them,
He would
during the
deliver
day,
after
deliver at
work.
Yeah.
We only had 5 people at that time in
And
the
Ga-
whole store.
And Gates Furniture was where?
7th and H.
Yeah.
And I understand that it wasn't too long post-war that the darkest day happened. And how did polio fit into? I mean, did you know that polio was a epidemic in
No, not when he got it, but then they realized that, well, they called it an epidemic. I don't know how many people actually were involved.
But right here in
but
Southern
Medford
Oregon.
and Grants Pass, both,
And you can
Yeah.
name people who were stricken?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Pat Garrett,
Pat,
was-
yeah, well, she was from Medford, and Pat Morgan. Now, I'm not sure if Pat Morgan was exactly at the same time as George, but
it was the fall of 1952.
yeah.
You use the term fall because it was something that just struck people down like an axe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
One day he was running the store, and the next day,
Yeah. he actually was at a furniture market when he came down with it, and he knew something was really wrong because it's very progressive, and the paralysis started in his legs, and he could just kind of feel it creeping up, and but he didn't know it was polio. But anyway, at that time, Dr. Johnson was our doctor, and he was from Oklahoma, and he recognized the symptoms immediately and sent him in an ambulance up to Eugene, where they had iron lungs. And at that time, the highway was under construction, and it took us 5 hours to get to Eugene, and by the time he got there, he was barely able to breathe. They had a lung waiting for us, you know, and they got him from the ambulance, threw him into the iron lung, and
saved his life?
Oh yeah, yeah.
You lose that ability to take a breath because your lungs become paralyzed, and so the only way you could breathe was the change of pressure through the iron lung.
Now, the iron lung was a part of your life for how long?
We didn't have an iron lung when they finally brought him home. We had what they call a Monahan respirator, which is a bubble, and it forces your diaphragm up and down. And then he was on a rocking bed, which rocks, and your diaphragm again goes up and down.
So then you were in the Eugene area, you just moved up there with him?
I would go up weekends because I had to run the store. So,
folks, you've heard this lady. She was a courageous woman. Went from housewife and mother of two little.
But you do what you have to do.
Two under three, is that right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 3 and 6 months.
And there you were now. Did you ever think of selling the business?
No, I never thought of it.
Probably we needed an income.
Yeah, we had to eat.
Yeah.
I just love to hear how women did what they did. They held together because he was never able to go to the store again.
No. Well, we took him down a couple of times in a wheelchair,
Just to see.
but it was just so involved. You know, we had to have all this equipment go with us, and it. But the salesman would come to the house and talk to George, you know, and he would give them his opinion. And it was hard for him to order because you have to be right there, you know.
It's kind of a
seeing
fashion
what's-
industry, and you got to keep
Yeah.
up with it, you know. Growing up, it kind of just a thought. Watching Dad all the years, I was 19 when he passed away, so I knew him for 19 years and never heard him complain. Amazing if you're quadriplegic and your life changes from he was kind of a man's man, like a hunter fisherman.
Oh.
And what they used to call him, the rogue of the Rogue Valley, I think. And you know, he was that type of physical person. And all of a sudden, you become a quadriplegic, and yet I never heard Dad complain in all the years. And he was always kind of like a hero to me, to think that you could go through that type of adversity and not complain about it. And
Well, this man that went from here, is this a wedding picture?
That's a
or-
wedding picture.
And that was where? That you were married?
In Medford at his parents' home.
And the 19 and what?
Let's see.
He was in the war?
It was after the war.
Oh, this
no,
is-
it was after.
48,
So, 47.
47.
How did the two
1947.
of you meet? I bet there's a story right there.
Well, we met on a blind date.
Woo!
and, I
Will
had-
those last, folks?
I had flown up to Medford to go skiing, and
At Crater Lake.
at Crater Lake, which doesn't even have any downhill skiing. But anyway, these friends conned me into coming up, and anyway, he was my blind date, and so that was it.
I think we should tell the story, though, about the proposal night. I think that's kind of interesting. And Dad had met Mom on this blind date and was very interested in her, and they communicated for a while. And then I think he got busy with work and didn't communicate for a matter of, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. But he goes back to San Francisco, where Mom lived, to attend the furniture market, and calls her up, if I remember the story right, and says, "Lois, this is George Gates. Would you would you like to go out to dinner with me?
Good line.
Type of thing. And Mom responds with, well, I'm sorry, but I'm engaged. And Dad goes, oh, gosh, well, how about just meeting for a drink then, you and your fiance? And Mom said, well, I'm sorry, but my fiance is out of town, And he said, well, just meet me for a drink. I'll toast your engagement, type of thing. And so Mom, I think, finally says, well, okay, type of thing. And so they meet down at the Fairmont or somewhere.
Chancellor
The
Hotel.
Chancellor Hotel for a little toast to the engagement. And I guess there must have been maybe one or two toasts. And then Dad ends up saying something like, well, what if I would have asked you to marry me instead of this other guy, And what was your response, Mom?
I said, well, are you wondering what I would say, or are you asking me?
And Dad said, well, I guess I'm asking you. And Mom said she accepted the offer and broke off the engagement with her fiancé. Suitor, yeah, and ended up marrying Dad. But the fiancé went and cried on your cousin's shoulder, and they ended up getting married. So
yes, they were.
It all worked
happily
out.
Ever
happily
after.
married. So.
I see the smile on your face, Lois. It must have been wild. This is post-war, wonderful time.
Oh,
when
yes.
Anything can happen. Huh?
That's for sure.
And it was the Brainards who introduced you, right, from Medford?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there was a common, they knew you from working in the Presidio.
The Presidio.
In San Francisco, and they were from Medford, and so they knew Mom and they knew Dad, and they thought this might be a match, and so.
So the skiing connection ended up being. Now, have you heard these stories before? Or this is a
No, we've heard them before. Yeah.
wonderful, such romance, Now, how long before this marriage took place, or should I even ask? Was that the next week?
Oh, it was a few months.
Oh, proper time to
Yeah.
get
But
acquainted
like
with.
I think July to September.
Oh, Mr. Gates moved fast.
Oh, yeah.
It was an ultimate sacrifice, too. It was the 1st of September, which was the opening of pigeon season.
Yes, and I
when they got
never
married.
saw him again on our anniversary.
That kind of reminds me of thinking about Dad and how he lived through us, because being a quadriplegic, he was at home, and he would send Mom on trips overseas to visit areas that maybe he had never seen. And then Gary was, and still is, a real outdoorsman, hunting, fishing, hiking, and Dad loved that type of thing. And then I was more into sports and cars and that type of thing, and so he would, I think, kind of live vicariously through all three of us. Gary with all of his interests that Dad loved, and myself with my interest, and then Mom with travel. And then he would also send all of us off on trips to go visit an area that he was kind of interested in. And Gary would photograph it, and I would come back and tell some things about where we had visited, and Mom would, of course, be with us.
We've heard of armchair travel. This would be rocking bed.
Rocking bed travel.
Yeah.
Now, did it cut his social life?
Oh, no. Our house was a center of activity.
Every day.
Every day. I would come
4,
home from work, and there would be friends there, always. I don't think I ever came home without somebody visiting.
What a support the community was.
Oh, they were wonderful, just wonderful. Yeah, they did so many things for us. I can't
Remember the
tell you all the
H Street
people.
Merchants?
Yeah, the H Street Merchants, when he was in the hospital at Sacred Heart, the H Street Merchants sent up a Christmas tree, and all the merchants would have a little tag on the tree. They
Gary-
sent it up to the hospital.
Gary, do you remember going to the Rogue Theater when Mrs. Mangle opened it up for us to see a movie?
We saw Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Yeah,
Right.
Alice
Now,
Mangle opened
what was that
the-
like?
Well, we had him in his bed with his chest respirator, and
Like a Sunday afternoon.
yeah,
when
they closed
didn't-
down the theater and just had it
Private
run
showing.
for us.
Uh,
But people did things like that.
Gene Gilpin, the Valley Cleaners, had a delivery truck, and we had a portable bed for Dad and a portable respirator. And we'd lift him we had a lift that lifted him out of his bed at home and into the portable bed. And then we'd roll him out into the van and hook him back up to the portable respirator.
And what was the show that you saw at the Rogue Theater? Is that right?
Yeah.
A couple.
It's Oklahoma.
One of them was Oklahoma.
One of them was Oklahoma.
So
There may
here's,
have been another.
imagine this theater with 4 people in it,
Yeah.
one in a bed. What a community outreach. What
Oh,
an
yeah.
incredible,
They're
incredible
wonderful.
thing. Now, people just accepted, but he wasn't just a lazy man, right? Even in his
Oh, his
paralyzed.
mind was very, very active.
And what did he do with this great mind in a paralyzed body?
Well, he just,
Remember, he ran
He was-
political campaigns.
oh
remember?
yeah,
He would,
yeah,
who was
John
it?
Dellenbeck's
Dellenback.
campaign, and
People would come down for advice. I mean, the governor, because that's another classic story, when the governor came to visit and talk to Dad about politics and get his impressions and views. And that was the day when I came home and I saw the great big limo in front of our house and it said #1 on the license plate. And
black stretch limo.
big limo, yeah. And so I thought, wow, who's here today? Because there was always cars out front.
Right.
But this was pretty unique. And so I come through and Dad stops me and introduces me to the governor. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty neat. And so then he sort of let me
Out
know
of
there
here,
was time
kid.
to move on, and they would talk politics. And so I went out the front door, and I thought, this is just too good to pass up. And so I started going around the neighborhood, gathering kids in the neighborhood, and for a quarter, I would take them to see the governor. And so that
I
only.
think he was a senator then.
Senator.
Or
Was he
was it
senator?
in reverse? Maybe he was a
No.
governor running
If
for
he had-
Senate.
I think of #1. I think he might have been. Well, who
I
knows?
guess he was the governor.
'Cause I remember #1 on the license plate,
Yeah.
so he was big time. But anyway, after 1 or 2 passes, Dad gave Mom the eye, and Mom gave me the escort.
Said, out of here, kid.
Yeah,
Were you so enterprising that
No,
you...
no, like I said, that was the good son.
he was the good son. That's right. He's the one. He was kind of tricky, though. He would sometimes do his own thing, and Dad would never know. And I'd
Yeah.
come in and argue, and so I'd get in trouble.
Right.
But Dad couldn't swat you.
No.
No,
But he
Not
had,
verbally.
you didn't need to.
put you in
oh,
line.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, he knew how to. You didn't have to even think about swatting. He took away privileges, or he would talk to you, and a physical reprimand was not necessary.
Well, you know, all 3 of you are so courageous, and I just love to meet you, and I'd love to hear story after story, because your wife said you could do 4 shows about this family.
It was a very, very unique way of growing up, and I'd like to, just even for moms, I'm sure I've told her this, but if I haven't, she should know it. Again, growing up, I always thought Dad was, what a hero, to be a quadriplegic and do all he did and impact the lives of so many people that would come to see him. But after he passed away, I started thinking about it, and I thought, oh my gosh, Mom is equal to, if not more courageous, because so many spouses left quadriplegics, and so many spouses would have moved on, and Mom said no, and we're going to be a family, and took over the business, and somehow ran a business and got to raise boys at the same time, and neither of us got in much trouble. So, I always thought Dad was so remarkable, and then I realized that, and Mom at that time doing business as a woman in the furniture industry, she was probably one of 2 in the whole West, probably, that women just weren't in the industry
At that time.
At that time, yeah. So.
Courage it took, the courage it took for you to step out. When you went to work every morning, how was the house kept together?
Well, we had a nurse come in, a nurse would come in every morning, and then a housekeeper was there in the afternoon,
Because he couldn't be kept left alone.
Never.
No, we had to have somebody there, and then I took care of him at night.
So your job was 8 hours at the store, or 9 or 10.
Whatever.
She brought it home.
And then she'd come home and it'd be a 14-hour day there.
And she'd bring home paperwork.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All I can do is say hats off to you, lady.
Well, thank
and
you.
and these 2 fine guys. And I understand you've got grandkids. Do you like to brag a little?
Oh, yes, have wonderful grandkids. Gary has two, a boy and a girl, and Greg is in the Navy, and he is a doctor. And Holly is a loan officer, and they are what, 30 and 26, about that.
Close, yeah, 29.
And 26. And Giff has two boys. One's at the U of O, and
Freshman.
Chad is a
Junior in high
junior.
school.
Well, we just have a little picture of that family, but not
Yeah.
yours yet.
Yeah.
So,
And one
a
great
And a
grandchild.
great grandchild.
are you the grandfather?
I'm a
Yes,
grandfather.
he's a grandfather.
What's this? What's this? This ties the whole show together,
Well,
right?
that's what the Courier asked us to do. They wanted a story about George.
The
And so that-
Gates Way.
The Gates Way, because it was his way.
Dad used to say, "There's a wrong way and the Gates way," is what he would say. His way, actually, I think.
Yeah.
You never felt like you were, what should we say, unfortunate kids?
So many friends, Mom and Dad's friends, all stepped up and,
Never
took
an
us
empty
hunting
house.
and fishing and.
The uncle thing? I
Oh
mean,
yeah. We had a stay-at-home dad, and
We never came home to an empty house.
right.
Well, I'd like to do, as your wife suggested, 4 shows with your family because you are so unique. A time in history, I remember the polio sulk. When that happened, there was rejoicing, but in your era, there was nothing.
Well, the vaccine came out shortly after George got polio.
I'm sorry the time's up for today, but I welcome you back anytime, and we can talk more about courage and history. Thank you so much for being my guest. I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying thanks for tuning in and hearing stories like no other.